Hey guys, it's Awesomemay, and I'm back from my very large hiatus to do something you've never seen on this channel before. Talk about animated movies. Oh my god. Specifically the third movie in animated franchises, because I made a very loud old video on my thoughts on animated movie sequels when I was starting movie reviews, and it didn't hit me until right now that I have yet, and I'd much rather tackle threequels, solely because I haven't done a video on Madagascar 3, Europe's Most Wanted, and that feels wrong and I need an excuse. The pit in my stomach of nostalgia I get when I go to YouTube every other year to rewatch the circus fireworks scene is indescribable. Yeah, sure, I could rewatch Super Bowl performances or read Guinness World Record books if I want to reminisce on the 2010s, but none of them will give me the goosebumps I feel when the tiger voiced by Bryan Cranston covers himself in oil and jumps through the ring of fire. There are two ways a studio can go when it comes to handling a third movie in a franchise, and that is one, make a movie that takes all previous elements that made the first two so good, puts them in a blender, and slaps on an ending scene that concludes the journey we went on, but is still vague enough to only slightly make you mad when they announce the next 10 movies. Or they go the second route, say screw it, and make a movie version of a cartoon filler episode. In Hotel Transylvania 2, Dracula throws his nephew off a tower to prove to Mavis he's gonna be a vampire, and you think it's heading in a direction where Dracula accepts that his nephew is different, just like he did with his son-in-law. Well, he actually is a vampire, and the writers realize they don't know how to tell good messages, so the characters are gonna play volleyball on a cruise now. This is also when they usually introduce the secret long-lost relative who has to, for some reason, be identical to our main character. I'm gonna be ranking these movies and guessing how messy I think the theater screenings were. This movie is up there with the Emoji Movie and The Long Haul when it comes to being aggressively and easily hated on in the animation reviewer community, and I don't think I'm gonna say anything different. My favorite thing to do when it comes to lower quality Sony animated movies is to search up concept art and just mourn. I can't believe art that looks like it came from a video game was made for a movie with a scene like this.
Yummy.
Don't get me wrong, I do think the first Hotel Transylvania is super solid, maybe up there with some of the funniest animated movies. The comedy of Johnny Andy Samberg teaching the monsters what it's like to be human was peak humor to 7-year-old me, and I have not grown out of it. Dracula learning to let go of his fears and to be less of an overprotective father is really good development. Overall, an unexpected good mix of gags and heart. And then these movies became more and more unbalanced as they focused less on character development, less on Mavis's life, and more on being as silly as possible. Genndy Tartakovsky had no hope for the rest of the film, so he just went absolutely insane with seeing how far he could take the cartoony animation. Every syllable out of Drax's mouth gives him a full body contortion, and I love it. This movie's story follows Dracula dealing with loneliness, going on monster Tinder, and Mavis suggests a vacation to give him a break from what she thinks is work stress. So all the monsters leave the hotel and go on a cruise, and this is when Dracula meets Erica, the great-granddaughter of Van Helsing, who are both secretly set on killing him / the monsters, and the cruise is actually a trap. And you can kind of predict the entire enemies to lovers plotline from here. Drax zings when he sees her because number one, this guy is super desperate, and two, because the writers changed their mind on the only zing once rule.
A zing only happens once in your life, and you have to cherish it.
If you asked me a couple years ago what I thought about Erica, I would say I hated her character design and that I really wanted to snip her chin. It drives me nuts. But this rewatch, I kind of got into seeing her feelings change on monsters and Dracula. Her reaction here is really well timed. This scene is also adorable, and that's kind of where my pros end. The gags in this installment feel like ideas that would work way better in comic strip form, and it's hard to get into what's happening when there are so many one and done bits stapled in between the story, which sucks even more because the first half does a good job at establishing jokes that actually build upon each other and feel connected. Dracula's friends making fun of his awkwardness around Erica brings the spirit from the first movie, and that vibe totally dies because the movie needs to have Fish singing Downtown by Macklemore.
I went to the moped store, I said sell it. Salesman's like, what up, what's your budget? And I'm like, honestly, I don't know nothing about mopeds.
I will say when it comes to comedy, the segment where the werewolves hand their kids over to daycare and are so confused by its existence is gold, but then it's ruined by an awkward transition that should have just been a cutaway.
Whatever we want.
Due to such a strong focus on Dracula, Mavis and Johnny are totally sidelined. They have absolutely nothing to do in this movie. Johnny gets maybe 7 lines in total, and these are the lines he gets.
Best summer vacation ever! Aw, that was a cute dude, honey. Maybe he's with Bob.
Why would he be with Bob?
Bob's a great guy.
Mavis almost gets a purpose in the plot as she's really the first one to actually notice that anything is up with Erica, but she barely gets to the bottom of it, nor does it feel like there's any rush for her to tell Dracula she thinks something's up. After the garlic scene, there's a perfect opportunity for the movie to take this Scooby-Doo mystery route, but that would be too interesting, I guess. Skipping some of the filler plot, Van Helsing summons the Kraken with what looks like was found at the back of a Spencer's. Erica slowly starts to regret the whole plan, and the movie at this point has some actual built-up tension and is finally leading somewhere. You're ready for the fight scene, and then Van Helsing whips out
Listen to the melody of your destruction.
This whole sequence feels like the writers are pranking us, like it's a Rickroll, and I can't be mad. I kind of moved a little bit. Johnny finally gets something to do and combats the Kraken with good vibrations and Macarena. Sony Animation got the last laugh here because what do you mean this scene got close to 500 million views? The delivery of Erica's apology to Drac is so funny.
I'm so sorry, Drac. I was trying to kill you this whole time.
They defeat Van Helsing and also save him.
Drac, what are you doing? You gotta be greater than the haters.
And there's the zing moment we were waiting for, and the movie ends with Dracula proposing to Erica. There's a huge missed opportunity for some kind of tribute to Martha here. Maybe like a scene where Dracula puts a framed picture of him and Erica next to one of him and Martha, showing although he's starting a new chapter in life, he'll never forget her. Something like Pixar did with the Carl short, but that would be asking too much. In fact, I don't even think Erica wants to marry him. This whole ending is just really bizarre. Why did she have this reaction if she was gonna say yes? Hotel Transylvania 3 is going in C, as although I didn't physically cringe at anything, it's still not a movie I would watch if I didn't have to for this video, and comparing it to the first two, you can feel how unaimed it is.
From the movie Trolls Band Together, here's Brozone.
It's taken me way longer than it should to finally watch this movie. I've been putting it off for so long just because Trolls World Tour was such an all-over-the-place mess that it genuinely erased my mind of the world building in these movies altogether. Color-wise, Trolls World Tour did something, I will give it that, super visually pleasing. Specifically with this country girl, I really love her color palette. I've given a lot of unnecessary hate to this franchise in the past, and I have to blame it on just the Trolls brand. It's so hard to not feel ashamed liking a movie with such marketable, gimmicky characters, but I'm done pretending jukebox musicals aren't my guilty pleasure. I've seen all of the Pitch Perfects. Seth MacFarlane's cover of My Way is on all of my playlists. The movie follows a young branch in the breakup of the brother boy band, Brozone, that happens mostly due to the older brother John Dory, who loves the smell of his own farts. His only redeemable quality being that he's voiced by Eric Andre. We get maybe the best line any animated movie has ever offered.
We're not in sync. We've gone from boys to men, and now there's only one direction for us to go. The backstreets.
Years later, Branch's favorite brother, Floyd, voiced by Troye Sivan, is taken by Veneer and Velvet, two spoiled pop star Nepo baby siblings who are using him to harvest the talent they don't have, and they crave the other brothers for even more power, who then take notice and start to reunite to save him. I like this story a lot better than Trolls World Tour. It feels more personal to the characters. The only con is that yes, this is a Trolls movie, so once they have that easy plot to stick with and expand upon, they somehow feel the need to try and coerce 3 other subplots into it. So now you have the fact that Poppy has a secret sister forced into everything that's happening, because I guess they felt bad that her only role for a lot of this movie is being Branch's therapist. I would have been okay with this if them meeting and finding out they're related wasn't so rushed and unbelievable. And then on top of this, they shove in this whole Poppy's sister Viva is still Bergen-phobic story that's just not interesting to me, and should have been taken out to focus even deeper on the brothers' unsolved issues. For this movie being an NSYNC reference, I had no clue before watching it that they were not actually main characters in this. I thought the NSYNC members were gonna voice the brothers, but apparently they only show up for a cameo near the end where they sing their new song Better Place, which I'm sorry is so annoying. I cannot believe the lyrics "I'm so excited to see you excited" got through a rough draft. Okay, my problems with the movie are out of the way because there's a lot I did enjoy and didn't expect to like so much. Our new villains, Veneer and Velvet, are such a good addition to this universe. They're based on Betty spaghetti dolls, and I like how this world tackles separating species. I love how aware Velvet is that she's evil and is totally okay with this. She outright admits multiple times that she has no talent whatsoever. James Corden is no longer in these movies, so they brought in Amy Schumer to play the character nobody likes.
Girl, we grew up in the suburbs. Our parents were dentists.
So, how was school today?
Stop attacking me!
Veneer being slowly separated from Velvet personality-wise as he's shown to be a little manipulated by her had me locked in. I'm getting ahead of myself, but the movie slightly redeems him near the end as he exposes what they've been doing, but still has him face punishment, and that was also perfect. It added a little more to that duo that could have just been so stereotypically evil and left at that.
I'm gonna have to repossess your yacht. Fair enough. Prison it is!
Their villain song being Sweet Dreams Are Made of This is so good. I was prepared for it to be Billie Eilish's Bad Guy. Great song choices in general when it comes to the jukebox aspect. The originals aren't super strong or memorable to me. Maybe It Takes Two and Perfect because I thought Baby Branch's singing was funny. But nothing overstays its welcome, it's all bearable. Visually, the movie goes back and forth from being super creative, looking really nice, and then kind of off. There's acid trip 2D animated segments, there's water made out of Orbeez that itches every crevice of my brain. But then there's a few shots where the characters move kind of robotically, and the look of the film is missing the theatrical feel. If you thought this franchise peaked with adult jokes at I Had a Sarcasm Once, this movie throws so many more at you, and all of them caught me off guard, specifically...
Chrissy, I didn't think we'd both find ourselves tied up on this honeymoon.
There's jokes making fun of the music industry that I didn't expect, especially when you have Justin Timberlake in the cast.
My kids love these guys. We're a total Veneer household.
They're the ones who have Floyd.
It's gonna be hard to separate the art from the artist.
We get a good heart-to-heart with the brothers as they all explain how John Dory treated them, being a perfectionist. And he explains that he felt required to, being the older brother, and I wish we got a little bit more of his side on that. This is kind of the only segment where it satisfyingly lets the brothers talk about things, and I wish it was longer. Branch ditches the group because he has to be the most dramatic and travels to the Velvet and Veneer concert with Poppy and Tiny Diamond, who's been repeating the same joke the whole movie.
Yeah, I knew what you was talking about.
The ending chase scene is very strong. It brings back all of the characters pretty well. The defeat of Velvet and Veneer is a little bit rushed, but that's probably because they're not supposed to be threatening characters. They're dumb. Velvet sees them dangling, and instead of like committing a scar, she just lets them fling themselves back up and smack her. The brothers do the perfect harmony, and Floyd floats down looking like a gummy mold. Why does he have such a grip on his foot? It's a beautiful heart-to-heart ending with a message about not letting people change you and to set boundaries, even if they're family. However, at the same time, Branch forgives his brothers and reconciles with them, so that message is a little blurry. But they need to make up fast because we've been leading up to true cinema.
We may not be the new kids on the block anymore, but I'm loving this new edition of us.
I'm gonna give this movie a surprising B, and I'm not doing that just because there's a Trolls fandom somewhere out there I could anger. Despite previously mentioned flaws, this movie actually tries to expand the characters without forfeiting it entirely for comedy. However, there's still time for Trolls 4: The Cruise Festival Getaway.
Let these animals do their show.
If I had a nickel for every threequel featuring a casino scene, I'd have 5 nickels for some reason. Is there a hidden agreement that once you get to the third one, the characters have to gamble? To be completely honest, I haven't thought about the Madagascar movies in maybe 5 years. I know that totally contradicts the intro to this video, but I don't think they have as much rewatchability as some of my favorite animated movies. But I will not deny the impact they've had, especially in meme culture. I have enough of the plot from the previous 2 movies remembered to kind of understand the third one upon rewatch. Then again, this one is a lot less focused on connecting itself to the rest of the movies, so it wasn't that hard. The wildlife aspect is thrown away for a circus spectacle plot that I can't even be mad at because it's so entertaining. The movie starts with Alex wanting to go back to the zoo, which doesn't seem super believable, as I thought the second one was built all around his family in Africa. But I understand his nostalgia for the past, and later on the movie does a good job having his feelings on the zoo come into play, and they're challenged. I do wonder why they chose to not feature Alex's family in the beginning though. That was weird. In order to get to New York, they have to find the penguins who are living it up in Monte Carlo. There's a weird emphasis on how hard it is for them to get to NYC, which is probably not the best plot point to follow up with, after you already showed the group traveled an insane distance from Kenya to Monte Carlo. We get introduced to our villain, animal control lady Capitaine Dubois, who wants to add Alex to her taxidermy collection, and her whole gimmick is that she's absolutely overpowered. DreamWorks does such a good job when it comes to villains that are just evil with no explanation. This woman crawls like a spider, has smell echolocation, and a secret singing power that heals her officers. The opening chase sequence where the gang tries to escape her has such a good mix of humor and tension. She doesn't say a single word the entire time other than her occasional grunts, and it's terrifying. They finally get rid of her and she just happens to land directly in a pool. The crew ends up joining the circus to stay under cover from Dubois as they find their way to New York, and this is when the movie loses a lot of steam with its balance of action scenarios and humor. Dubois becomes a lot less important, and I wish it felt like there was less of a split between the circus plot and her searching for them. But oh my god, the prison escape after she gets arrested saves it for me. Her making the prison guards think she escaped so that she could actually then escape is genius. I forgot to mention the penguins actually bought the circus from the human owners to revamp it, and now Alex has become the host of it. I love a good fraud trope where a character lies about their credentials. I love it in School of Rock. I love it here. I don't care if nostalgia critics said otherwise 10 years ago.
Higher reveal plot, which a lot of you know I really despise. Which, as you know, I really fucking despise. Which, as most of you know, I hate.
Alex does some harassment in the workplace. I'm just kidding, but there's a love arc with him and Gia the Jaguar that's super predictable. And I would have hated it if it wasn't for how likable and passionate Gia is. Stefano, the Italian sea lion voiced by Martin Short, feels like he was always meant to be in this franchise. And although maybe the circus story isn't super interesting, it brings in some really great characters and fun interactions. Alex pretending to be good at trapeze is a great gag. Gloria and Melman get a super intimate scene dancing together. I feel like I'm interrupting. Vitaly, the best character in the Madagascar universe. I love his character design. He gets a really cool backstory as it deals with the trauma of his great failure trying to jump through the small ring of fire, and it carries the emotional weight this movie is missing and gives us super creative transitions. The pep talk Alex gives him where he realizes the fact that it being impossible to do was the whole reason for doing it is also
It was always impossible, Vitaly. That's why the people loved it.
Only issue is that after that realization, the struggle he was having to get over his fear and try again is wiped completely. So when he succeeds at the jump, the payoff is not really there. If it came out in the 2020s, we could have gotten a panic attack scene, but it's fine because neon colors everywhere. And all I can think about is how jealous I am of whoever got to see this movie in 3D. They are crashed by Dubois after a great performance, and this is when the peak of the liar revealed trope comes into play, where the characters feel betrayed but then decide that the fun they had outweighed the fact they were lied to. The ending brings back that perfect mix of all elements, humor, action, great pacing that the first 20 minutes did. The gang gets back to the zoo and realize it wasn't how they remembered it, and that maybe leaving it was the best thing for them all along. Yes, it does make the whole journey that they just went on to get back to the zoo pointless, but I can ignore that with how satisfying this ending is.
Yeah, out there, in the world, we were really living.
Yeah! It was exciting!
It was romantic.
It was dangerous.
I never felt so alive.
When we were with the circus, we were already home.
Then they get darted by Dubois as she wins a cash prize for getting Alex back in the zoo. She's still gonna kill him though while everyone's watching, but it's okay because the circus gang is there to help, using their circus skills to treat Dubois like the animals she is. Melman sings Afro Circus while they're ready to start their free lives again, and I wipe my tears away as they dance. And it's an even better conclusion when you consider that DreamWorks ended it here, which literally never happens. It blows my mind we're not at Madagascar 5 right now, and I'm thankful they didn't milk it dry. I'm gonna give this movie a solid A, mostly because of the heavy lifting of the satisfying ending.
Ooh la la.
I know this movie, Despicable Yes 3. This one I had to pause maybe 5 times to just breathe and figure out what was happening. This is where the cracks start to show for the franchise, where it's very obvious Illumination had lost it since the first 2. They had just finished the Minions spin-off that did irreparable damage. The kids start to get less screen time, and when they do, it has no connection to the main story. Margot gets basically the same subplot she did in the last movie, except this time it's this fat kid she doesn't like.
Who was I kidding? A dumpling like me with a goddess like you.
Get out!
Agnes tries to find a unicorn, and I hate how Agnes has become more and more of the throwaway, shoehorned in, cutesy character. I love how she got on Gru's nerves in the first movie. I refuse to believe Agnes from 3 and 4 is the same Agnes that held her breath until she fainted to threaten Gru. Lucy slowly becomes just mother character and doesn't feel like a partner in crime to Gru anymore. The Minions become more of a hive mind cluster, which they always have been, but I don't know, the first 2 movies worked a lot harder to separate some of them. Where is Bob, Kevin, and Stuart? The only thing that really carries this movie is the villain. Balthazar Bratt is our new big bad, a child TV star who hit puberty and was blacklisted from Hollywood and now seeks revenge. Basically a Ryan Toy Reviews foreshadow. I like the 80s look and the references. I liked looking at his bald spot anytime he was on screen. My eyes kept jumping to it and I kept giggling. I like him maybe a tiny bit more than El Macho, but just because he's voiced by Trey Parker, which might be my favorite casting choice ever. Trey wanted to do this movie to give his daughter something she can actually watch involving him, and I adore that.
Right at the time, my daughter, I think, was about 2, and I was like, oh, how cool would it be, though, to be able to go to the premiere and have my daughter be able to watch something I actually did, instead of like, you can't see this, you know?
The music is always good. Hug Me has stood the test of time. Pharrell Williams, for some reason, gets so much creativity from the Minions. Freedom has no right being so good, especially when this is the scene it's paired with. And I do think there are smart choices Illumination makes under the fluff, just not enough to outshine it. After failing to stop Brat, Gru gets fired from the AVL League, and Ramsbottom retires, being replaced by a new director. This movie does absolutely nothing with this character, by the way. This is maybe her only scene. Gru deals with an identity crisis for maybe 10 seconds until conveniently he's told of the existence of his twin brother, Drew, who was separated at birth, whose one character trait is that he's obnoxious, and judging by concept art, he was gonna be much more interesting than he ended up being. How did you screw this up? He reveals that their dad was a supervillain as well, and it's not brought up again. This guy was named the Bald Terror, and we don't get any more information than that. No flashback, nothing. And also, like Drew, he was gonna have a way more creative character design and was gonna have actual scenes. I do like the idea of Drew wanting to be a villain and helping Gru stop Brad and steal back the diamond. Fun brotherly bond forms out of this that I don't mind. There's also a break of that friendship because Gru wants to return the diamond and Drew wants to keep it that I also don't mind. And there is something that's almost tapping the surface of some emotion, some feeling. Brad makes a mech version of himself, which is plagiarized from an episode of Evil Brad. Brad being disguised as Lucy in this scene actually did shock me, and I hate that it did. You got me on this one, Illumination. He is kind of dumb for kidnapping the girls though, because it only alerts Gru quicker. If you want to have time to destroy Hollywood, it's probably not the best idea to immediately get the attention of the person that's gonna stop you. Definitely when your only backup weapon is a keytar, it made sense for Vector to kidnap the girls as it was to lure and force Gru to give him the moon, but it makes zero sense here because Brett already got the diamond. What does he need the girls for? This whole movie was leading up to maybe the shortest villain defeat I have ever seen. Lucy celebrates feeling like a real mother. Drew steals the minions as they deem him the villain they are gonna serve, and you can feel the aura of this is a cliffhanger that's not gonna be resolved in the air. And the movie ends, and I feel hollow. Despicable Me 3 is an obvious C. This is probably my shortest segment because I really have nothing more to say. Someone needs to let these writers sit down and watch the first movie again to see an actual story that doesn't trail off every 10 minutes. Ice Age is a franchise most people agree lost a lot of its charm the higher in quality it got, and maybe it's because the first few are paired with nostalgia, or maybe it's because the better and smoother the movies looked, the more annoying the movies got as they truly overstayed their welcome. It's like if the Bionicle movies kept going, or if they made 3 more Clutch Powers. You hit gold at such a specific time, and you're squeezing it dry, and now we all hate these characters. It just blows my mind there's 5 of these, and Disney is throwing a 6 into the ring. Scrat already got the acorn. That being said, Dawn of the Dinosaurs does not fall in the category of being as bad as the last 2. For starters, dinosaurs make so much sense to come into play, and it's really the last one in the series that feels like it has a clear vision and gives all of the characters almost equal importance. Manny gets stressed as he prepares for his and Ellie's baby, and although the movie doesn't really get too deep into it, you can feel his past trauma of losing a previous family have a play in his anxiety. There's a bit where he tries to safe-proof nature that's super clever. I'm a sucker for non-human characters doing human things. Diego deals with feeling like his predator nature is going, so he's gonna leave to find his own adventure, and Manny's a complete jerk about it.
You're taking this the wrong way.
No, go find some adventure, Mr. Adventure Guy. Don't let my boring domestic life hit you in the butt on the way out.
And by far, my favorite plotline, which causes the eventual full storyline, is Sid attempting to parent 3 baby dinos that imprint on him, It's so fun to watch. It's the best character you can choose to be responsible for living beings, because you know he's gonna suck at it even when he's trying his hardest. And the gags that come from that are so hooking.
I'm your baby and this is my milk.
I thought you were a female!
Manny and Diego's arcs are more of an added bonus to Sid's journey becoming a mother. Sid just in general carries this movie and a lot of the later ones on his back as he kept his lively, lovable energy. I also think Sid might be one of the few characters in cinema who can scream multiple times and it not get old.
This is the end of Sid the Sloth.
This is a surprisingly very dialogue-heavy movie, which is another aspect I really like. There are some mature conversations that really bring you into the relationships, and then in the same movie, you'll get an Alvin and the Chipmunks reference.
Christmas, Christmas time is here.
A joke about coming out.
I knew that guy when he was a caterpillar. You know, before he came out.
Scrat gets seduced live on tape. So we get the best of both worlds, just as the first Ice Age did so well. The writers were still clearly having a good time with the universe. The group all go and try to find Sid as he was abducted by the mama T-Rex. I love the dynamic that grows between the mama and Sid. The group ends up discovering an underground world of dinosaurs, and it's just a really cool, intense scene. The music goes for a Jurassic Park parody vibe, and we also later get a Star Wars-like sequence, and it feels like Dawn of the Dinosaurs is bringing all these elements from big iconic films, and it could not work better. John Powell's soundtrack paired with all these scenes hits. They eventually encounter our new character, Buck the Weasel, who fell into the dino world as a youngin' and has become the Indiana Jones of the Mesozoic jungle. Buck is the so random addition to this universe, and I'm sorry, but I think I'd like him and his involvement 100 times better if he was pushed way more as the adventurous character and less of the comic relief, because his rivalry with Rudy the albino dinosaur is sick as hell and also gives us this awesome plot twist as we realize Buck's knife is actually a Rudy tooth. But then in between this, he whips out one-liners that just don't stick. Don't kill me, I know he's a fan favorite. I will live with the consequences of saying this. At the very least, this movie does right by not having him completely take over like he does in Collision Course. And of course, you cannot go wrong with Simon Pegg. Also, speaking of Rudy, the buildup of him throughout the runtime is fantastic. It constantly feels like he's a looming threat despite barely being on screen. And the final act with the "there's a bigger dinosaur" cliche is really enjoyable. The movie ends on so many high notes. Sid realizes his worth in the pack. Diego comes to terms that he's not made of stone. Scrat falls out of love and goes back to his true love, the acorn. Ellie gives birth to Peaches in the midst of a Guanlong attack, which I totally skipped over, but this joke got a genuine chuckle from me.
Push! Push!
I can't do it!
Just one more big push!
You have no idea what I'm going through. Okay, forget I said that.
Dawn of the Dinosaurs is going right beside Madagascar 3 and A. I feel like I have a similar enjoyment for both of them. As I'm rewatching and watching these threequels, I'm noticing a pattern of way too much happening. Dawn of the Dinosaurs is a real breather sequel that hones in on the found family aspect of the first Ice Age, as well as builds Manny and Ellie's future as parents, and it's actually insane to me that this series wasn't concluded here. They had the perfect chance for the last words of the franchise to be a title drop.
That's right, sweetheart. Welcome to the Ice Age.
Ah! Oh! Donkey! Donkey! Wake up!
I'm gonna get straight into this one. Shrek the Third commits the biggest crime of all, and that is by being just and only uninteresting. At the very least, Despicable Me 3 and Hotel Transylvania 3 are mindlessly entertaining. Shrek the Third doesn't even offer that, which is insane to say with this movie coming after two incredibly excellent films about self-acceptance and true love. Shrek the Third offers little entertainment and offers more uncomfortableness, as there's so much in this movie that just stays on screen too long, to the point It stresses me out. The death of King Harold is funny because of the jump cut joke here, but then the humor associated with the scene becomes so played out that you genuinely want him to die so the scene can end. Prince Charming, I just loathe. He's super one-dimensional, and halfway through my Shrek 3 rewatch, I forgot he was even part of this movie and audibly sighed when he popped back up. He's a character that clearly only works as a side protagonist because he isn't threatening enough for me to extend any belief that he's gonna get revenge on Shrek, and he comes nowhere near being as memorable as Farquaad or Rumpelstiltskin.
I will stop being so polite. Get the fuck out of my sight before I demolish you.
We get some development with Shrek and Fiona as Fiona is pregnant, which challenges the relationship as Shrek doesn't think he'll be a good father and that his children will be embarrassed of him. This is interesting and the most expected conflict to introduce on paper, but it's explored very lightly with not much communication, which yes is the point as Shrek keeps trying to avoid talking about it, but because the writers chose to go that route, it takes away so much of the plot potential and character growth this movie could have had. I want to see Shrek and Fiona actually argue about this, but instead the movie splits them off into their own stories, and Shrek quickly changes his mind at the end to be like, oh, actually I do want kids now. And it's all solved. The dream sequence that comes from Shrek's fears near the beginning is inserted in awkwardly, and instead of it making the audience understand his worries, it's just over the top and gross.
Huh? Oh no. Better out than in, I always say.
Because of the death of King Harold, it leaves Shrek to take over as king of Far, Far Away, which he decides he doesn't want to be. He wants to go back to living freely at his swamp, so he sets out to find the other option for king, Arthur Pendragon, voiced by Justin Timberlake. I think Justin Timberlake thought he was voicing in a video game here because that's how his performance sounds most of the time.
This is gonna be huge. Parties, princesses, castles.
That being said, I actually don't mind Arthur as a character, and him being excited to be king as he's a loser at his high school is fun to watch, or at least it's fun for a second until he has probably the quickest switch up I've ever witnessed in cinema history. He goes from I cannot wait to take on the challenges of being king to I don't know anything about being king.
Look, I know it's not all gonna be fun and games, but I don't know anything about being king!
It feels like there's no build up to anything that happens, and the awful timing of this movie becomes so apparent that it just becomes funny eventually, as you start to think this has got to be on purpose, but why is it on purpose?
Even ogres get scared. You know, once in a while.
Piece of cake.
Well, well, well. You want some eggs with that ham?
Arthur and Shrek's bond forming as they relate to each other being outcasts is sweet. I like the switching bodies Freaky Friday joke with Donkey and Puss. The princesses breaking into the castle is badass. I don't think the film is entirely void of creative moments that work or could work, but by the last act, it's so overstuffed with characters and easy outcomes that my brain short circuits watching. The ending montage with the Shrek babies featuring Losing Streak by Eels is honestly really fun and has the classic Shrek feel. It just sucks that the highlight of the movie is the last 5 minutes. I'm gonna go with C because I don't think I can take it on my conscience putting a Shrek movie lower than the other movies in C. It's time for another movie featuring Bryan Cranston, Chopkick Panda 3. This movie might be the best on this list when it comes to being visually stunning. The lighting is so pleasing in this film, the mix of gold and oranges, and do not get me started on the use of turquoise. Each Kung Fu Panda movie has kept pushing its limits with stunning animation and storytelling with just visuals alone. I don't know what happened with Kung Fu Panda 4. Kung Fu Panda 3 is the Lego Ninjago movie of the Kung Fu Panda trilogy in terms of it strays a little far from the kung fu aspect and the darker atmosphere of the previous two, but it's such a personality-driven movie that it's not really a letdown to me. It focuses more on building Po emotionally rather than physically as a character, as he has to face going from student to teacher and the self-doubt that comes with that. Po's biological father, Lee, has such a perfect reunion with Po that shows their similar personalities colliding. The elephant in the room that sparks with Mr. Ping being jealous of Lee, worried he's gonna be replaced after all he's done to raise Po, builds a lot of great tension, and I felt so bad for him as he stumbles anxiously around. But then Lee and Ping become a co-parent team as Ping has to show Lee how to be a good father, and I'm so happy this film takes that route rather than having them hate each other or fight over his love. I got the biggest smile on my face when Ping tells Lee this.
But I realize having you in Po's life doesn't mean less for me. It means more for Po.
Our main villain for this one is General Kai, voiced by the legend J.K. Simmons. His villain theme is apparently inspired by an Imagine Dragons song. Kai is a friend turned enemy of Master Oogway, and the film opens up with an incredible face-to-face. Master Oogway fights him in the spirit realm with inspirational quotes, and Kai predictably wins, which then gives him the power to leave the realm to track down Po and steal all Kung Fu Master's chi to be the most powerful. He doesn't have as much of a backstory as other Kung Fu Panda villains, nor does he feel as evil as them. Kai would never say this.
Your parents didn't love you.
But he isn't nowhere near boring. The whole bit with him using jade zombies to spy and attack was epic. I love the running joke of nobody knowing who Kai is, and in general, with his character comes the funniest dialogue in the movie. This joke specifically really stood out to me because it's the best example of this film constantly topping itself with its humor.
Your chi will soon be mine.
Is he talking to me?
Which one? They're all talking.
Whoa, you're right. That's so scary. We should try that too. Maybe it'd be scary back at them.
I think this might be the funniest of the Kung Fu Pandas if you ignore the kind of cringe Po lines that are almost too Jack Black coded.
I think I just peed a little.
Po goes off with Lee and Ping to the Panda Village to be taught Chi, which Lee says he knows. The mysterious first half of learning the backstory of Kai ends, and the second half becomes kind of an intermission, and gets super goofy with montages of Po learning to be a true lazy panda. There's a lot of dad jokes, so much so that I could hear my own dad laughing in my head when watching.
Did I oversleep?
You sure did.
Yes!
And because this is such a non-specific part of the movie, it does have the problem of feeling like it repeats itself. So when you finish watching, all the Panda Village parts become scrambled in memory. You can move around these scenes and it wouldn't change much, and I get why people consider this one the weakest of the main three, as none of this truly matters, but it's too much of a good time with clever slapstick to not be into it. I need more of Mei Mei, she's such a diva. If Po doesn't want her, I will volunteer as tribute.
Wow, she's amazing. She's so beautiful. That's sweet, Po. But please try to save all other compliments until after the performance.
It's eventually revealed that Lee actually has no idea how to do Chi, and this completely breaks the trust of Po. I'm not a huge fan with how they tackle having Po forgive him so easily and quickly. That being said, the switcheroo in the plot as now Po actually has to teach the Panda Village to do Kung Fu in a short time is really awesome. And Po realizes that teaching isn't about them learning to be like him, it's about them learning to be themselves to the highest extent. The same thing he had to learn in the first movie. He teaches all the pandas to hone in on their strengths and use it as combat, and this ends up teaching him that this was how to master Chi all along, by finding your true, most authentic inner self. The final battle is intense, and Kai finally feels intimidating. The fight sequence is on par with previous Kung Fu Panda fights. It feels like everything in the plot finally comes together, and also remains silly at the same time, which the movie so obviously wants to do. Po sacrifices himself, taking Kai to the spirit realm to finish the battle.
Skadoosh!
And this is where he becomes the master of Chi and defeats him with the power of all the Chi the village is giving him, as it showed that Kung Fu Masters giving Chi is much more powerful than Kai taking it, perfectly roping back to Oogway's the more you take, the less you have sentiment. Oogway's spirit comes back to tell Po he was always meant to be the future of Kung Fu. He gives him the Staff of Wisdom, and it beautifully wraps up Po's self-doubt of not knowing who he is. The trilogy ends on such a perfect message about how you can be so many things.
Am I the son of a panda? The son of a goose? A student? A teacher? Turns out, I'm all of them.
Kung Fu Panda 3 is an S tier. It remains pretty strong throughout. The Furious 5 still get their moments, even though Tigress is really the only one we get a lot of due to the other ones being stupid. Jack Black's voice performance is pitch perfect again. I cannot picture these movies without him voicing Poe. And even with its faster pace, more consumable for children middle half, it's still watchable for all audiences. I found out that this movie was actually intentionally changed during development to be a lighter film due to parents' complaints of the second one being too dark for children, which kind of sucks, and DreamWorks shouldn't have gave in, but also at the same time, I'm kind of impressed that this is still a good movie despite that. I'm just gonna say it, I've never been a fan of Cars. Lightning McQueen and Tow Mater are great characters, and I get their appeal, but the world and the environments are not my cup of tea. Kids who loved this movie growing up were really into NASCAR and racing, and I was really into Phineas and Ferb and Rainbow Loom. Scratch that, this movie was released when I was 3 months old, so actually, I was busy vomiting and discovering I had hands. However, that being said, I have a deep connection with Cars 3, and I think it's maybe the second best movie on this list for me, and I'd almost say it's better than the first movie. But again, I'm biased, not being a true Cars fan, but as a Pixar movie, I think it's underrated. First of all, the marketing campaign was absolutely insane. The posters and trailers were so dramatic for no reason. People actually thought McQueen was going to canonically die, and I like that. I miss when Pixar trailers were really vague and almost clickbait. Just like Monsters University, Cars 3 does such a great job having a realistic lesson for its characters with no sugarcoating. The story explores Lightning McQueen no longer being in the spotlight due to being one-upped by new improved racers, and he has to deal with feeling like his time is almost up. And instead of the film making McQueen go out there and have a comeback so that he doesn't feel like he has reached what they call unk status, it acknowledges that maybe it is time for him to lay back a bit and find new purpose, and how that doesn't have to be a negative thing. Throughout the film, Lightning gets a better and fuller picture on the past and this concept through memories of Doc Hudson, as he realizes it wasn't about being the best and fastest racer for Doc, it was about the community he had built, the friends he made along the way, and most importantly, mentoring Lightning. And it breaks me, and I don't know how anyone could not like this movie or shed tears. This all being a tribute to Paul Newman makes it even more emotional and a true love letter to the films.
Racing wasn't the best part of Hud's life. You were.
And from this, McQueen himself finds joy in rooting for others and mentoring, specifically helping trainer Cruz Ramirez, who never got the chance to be a racer as she didn't feel like she belonged, and it's beautiful. It shows Lightning, hey look, you did get the chance, some people don't get that at all. For you to be in your flop era, you had to succeed in the first place, and it's such a good message to athletes, artists, all creatives that hit that same rut. It's a story about how you should be proud of yourself for past accomplishments, but that also future accomplishments don't have to look exactly the same to the accomplishments you're used to. McQueen feels like he knows nothing other than being a top racer, and this movie grows his purpose beyond that. Now, I do think the first 30 minutes is hard to watch because it's so hyper-focused on making Lightning embarrassed, humiliated, and paints the picture that he's washed up to an almost unrealistic extent, and the old jokes Cruz and the other characters make are a little too much. You just feel bad for Lightning a good chunk of the film, and that's not really enjoyable, but it's necessary and purposely over the top for McQueen's development to truly pay off. One thing I would fix if I was involved with Cars 3 would be to make Jackson Storm a nicer, more team sport character, because with him being such a sarcastic douche, it does lessen the value of the moving on message the movie concludes with, because the viewer the whole time so badly just wants Lightning to show Storm who's boss and give him some deserved karma, so I can't blame fans who are disappointed with the way it ends, with Lightning putting Cruz into the race as his replacement and not actually beating him personally. But then again, I think it went the right direction, allowing McQueen to have one last hurrah, but also jumpstart Cruz's racing career at the same time. So then she gets to give Storm the karma, so it's a win-win conclusion. Cruz doing the 360-degree flip and the slow motion that comes with this scene is so good. The sound mixing is so impressive in this movie, especially during the races. Two other things I'd fix is, one, I'd add just a bit more Tow Mater. I get that they were trying to make up for Cars 2, but god, everything in this movie feels concise and knows its place except for Mater. And two, I'd take a little less Thunder Hollow, because with it being such a long segment in the film, it gives you a little more time to think, Yeah, this scene was clearly only made so Disney could squeeze a toy set out of it, but everything else is perfect and feels like it so clearly had a focused outcome. I'm putting it an S whether you like it or not. Yes, I think it's as good as Kung Fu Panda 3. Now, I would say this is a great ending point for Cars, but only because it paints itself as one and also kind of flopped. I do think Cars is more open to more ideas than other Pixar IPs, due to the fact Cars movies don't have to be super linear. But because this movie wraps McQueen up in a nice bow, I'm very curious to see how they're gonna do Cars 4 without retconning the whole arc McQueen just went on. If I had a nickel for every third movie that features a hidden world, I'd have... Just kidding, I'm not doing that bit again. I have kind of conflicting thoughts on How to Train Your Dragon 3, which I understand is crazy for me to say after praising Cars 3 so hard, but on one hand, it has such a smart and stellar ending and conclusion that you cannot tear up at, but on the other hand, I wouldn't say it's that memorable of an actual movie, and feels like it's a bit indecisive on what it wants to do with everything except for the final act. I want to like it so bad because of how beautiful it is and how much of an epic it feels like, and they clearly put effort into making it feel bigger in scale than the first two. The faraway dragons flying together shots looked amazing. You can see every pore on Hiccup's face now, but story-wise it kind of falls flat in building up to the ending. For starters, the actual hidden world part doesn't feel all that important, and I wish we had spent more time in it, especially as that's the end goal for where the dragons are gonna end up. You'd think it'd have a bigger play. The movie takes away the first two movie storylines about dragons coexisting with humans and decides, well, they actually can't because there will always be bad people out to get them, so they must depart from humans to go and live in the hidden world alone, which would be a fine conclusion, as I respect the Birkin's selflessness and I'm fine with goodbye endings. They don't make me mad like they do for other people, but the movie doesn't even give the Vikings of Berk a chance to try and stay in the hidden world with them before making that decision. Literally only Hiccup and Astrid go. I get that Hiccup realizes he doesn't want to intrude on the dragons that are already living there in peace, that are also hostile, but it's so short of a realization and feels out of character for Hiccup because he was before this so optimistic about relocating with dragons. This is also the same kid that did not give up when Toothless showed hostility and believed good could outweigh bad and you needed to fight for good. What happened to that character motivation? Again, to be clear, I don't have an issue with him changing his mind and the dragons splitting up with humans. I have an issue with the rushed execution leading up to this resolution and the lack of other characters' input on this. My other big issue with the film is that there's a lot more telling than showing, especially with our villain Grimmel, who, don't get me wrong, is terrifying. The scene where he pops up in the dark all big-lipped and big-chinned like a sleep paralysis demon is frightening, but as for actually being scary, the story spends a lot of its time trying to convince you he's evil by characters' remarks about him, rather than just letting him actually be. He plays as more of a metaphor for why Vikings have to let dragons go than an actual undefeatable threat. I mean, he literally dies and it doesn't change the outcome whatsoever. Also, the fact that he's after Toothless and Hiccup barely does anything to protect him was kind of weird. Like, sure, yep, we just made a whole deal about how we need to hide the dragons from the bad guys, but you can go off on your own. Those issues aside, there are some development positives that I can get behind. The group gets some well-balanced moments. All I can think about when I watch this movie is how much I miss this group and the humor their characters had together. It made me think about Big Hero 6 and how much I need a Big Hero 7. I need more Power Ranger feeling character groups in animated movies. I'm obsessed with Fish Lake's braided mustache. Snotlout gets a bit where he keeps hitting on Hiccup's mom. That's literally all he does in the movie, but I thought it was funny in a he's still doing that kind of way.
Yeah, your mom's super impressed with me. I'm like the son she always wanted.
Ruffnut being annoying to Grimmel after being kidnapped is maybe the best scene comedy-wise. I still remember loving this part when I saw it in theaters. Hiccup and Toothless get even more bro-out moments as Hiccup wingmans him while he tries to flirt in court with the Light Fury. The movie does a good job splitting their futures slowly and having them become more of their own characters. I love how this scene is animated, and I would take the comedy in this film over Shrek 3's comedy any day. The marriage scene is a treat to my eyes. I cannot state enough how beautiful this segment looks. DreamWorks Snow can do no wrong. At the end of the day, I do really love the time jump ending this movie chooses to go for. Very different from other sequels. It has such a different impact than if this film was to end with Hiccup saying goodbye to Toothless and that being it. The follow-up does feel earned, and the narration from Jay Burchell is just the right amount of dramatic that it feels real. The connection Hiccup and Toothless have will always remain no matter how far apart they are. This scene perfectly describes seeing a cousin after so long and not recognizing them because now they have a full beard. How to Train Your Dragon: The Hidden World is gonna be an S tier. It ends with so much appreciation to what the trilogy has built. Again, John Powell's music hits. And whereas you can feel the lack of confidence in other franchise endings due to them holding out for hope they can squeeze more out of it, this movie accepts itself as its definite ending and feels very confident in it. And that makes up for my complaints about the rushed character decisions.
Something changed that day inside Lotso. Something snapped. She replaced us. Come on.
And finally, best for last, we of course have Toy Story 3, no shocker here. Not only is this the best animated movie threequel, it's also, in my opinion, probably the best threequel period, slightly above War for the Planet of the Apes for me. It does not miss a single beat, nothing ever gets boring or too drawn out, every single plotline connects and never feels wasted. Every time you rewatch it, you can find more and more little hints and foreshadows in the first act to what happens later in the film. Miss Potato Head losing her eye connecting to her using it to spy on Andy later, Bonnie holding the security camera monkey when Andy's mom comes in to donate, shattered telephone hitting Woody on the leg as an early warning. The new characters manage to be just as good as our main ones, which is hard to accomplish when you have iconic characters like Woody and Buzz. I love Chatterphone and the uneasiness of him speaking through his phone.
Get rid of that monkey.
I love Bookworm. He's technically on the enemy side, but pun characters get me every time, and Pixar does them so well. Big Baby devastates me. I feel so much doom and anxiety anytime I see him on screen, and I spent most of this rewatch looking like this, happily waiting for the part where he throws Lotso into the dumpster. Even Totoro and Mabel are in this film.
Who's Velocistar 237?
Oh, that's just a dinosaur toy down the street. That's nothing. Let me just take care of that.
As for the main characters, they are as balanced as they can be, all equally getting their moments to shine, to have a purpose, and to say. It says a lot about the quality of the first three Toy Stories that some of my favorite parts are literally just the main characters conversing. And this one makes sure to give you more of that, more Mr. Potato Head's snarky remarks, more of Woody's out of nowhere shouting,
"He was putting you in the attic!"
Toy Story 3 focuses on Woody and the gang having to come face to face with the fact Andy is grown up now, going to college, and no longer needs them. The Green Army men have dipped, the posters are overlapped with new ones, Buster is on the brink of death. Everything is aging, and the previous two Toy Story themes about being lost or forgotten has even more of a play. They're about to go into the attic, but Andy's mom mistakes them for garbage, which makes all the toys think Andy was throwing them away. And so all of them but Woody decide they're ready to move on and go to Sunnyside Daycare. Woody's stubbornness to return to Andy clashing with the rest of them excited to be played with again builds the conflict in the first half. Woody is super self-centered here, only really caring about how he feels, and the other toys can't take his reasons seriously to return to Andy because he's the only one that was gonna go to college with him. So there's so much bias with his outlook on their future. But he's proved to be kind of right, as the joy of being played with and meeting all these new toys is completely broken, and the whole energy of the film changes when playtime actually starts. I do want to stop here and say I've seen the only real issue pointed out about Toy Story 3 being that it's weird that the toys don't believe Woody about Andy not throwing them in the trash despite him being right in the past. And for that, I have the stance of they clearly do believe him to a certain extent, but they've already made up their minds about moving on. They only decide to drop the act of not believing him eventually because they no longer see the daycare as the better option to being in the attic. Lotso is such a scary villain because he's painted as so lovable and warm, and even when that facade ends and his whole messed up operation is revealed, he still keeps that demeanor, but now that lovable warmness becomes clear manipulation, and you realize it was the whole time, making him even scarier.
So you got donated by this Andy, huh? Well, it's his loss, Sheriff. He can't hurt you no more.
Whoa.
Now
No,
let's
no,
get you all settled in.
I also love how the writers do the complete opposite with Ken. You expect him to be obviously a bad guy because of his ego and appearance, but he has an uncertainty to his character as we go further into the film that you feel he's gonna have a change of heart, which he does. Woody ending up at Bonnie's house is the perfect subplot that not only alerts him of the truth about Sunnyside to then go there and get them out and start the rest of the plot, but it gives him a slow growth to realize there are more memories to make out there beyond Andy. Toy Story 3 slowly builds its lessons and introduces them early in such a way that it doesn't feel like it's gonna be anticlimactic when the characters come to realizations in the end. Something I don't feel How to Train Your Dragon 3 accomplishes as well. The prison break segment is by far my favorite part of the movie. It pushes that classic suspensefulness of Toy Story 1 and 2 to its limit. The monkey that watches the security cameras still haunts me. There's something so soulless about this character that Pixar nailed. And of course, my hands can never not get clammy during the incinerator scene. It's so stressful. The toys struggling to get out of the flooding garbage after Lotso left them to die, and them eventually giving up and holding hands accepting death is insane. and you forget that you're watching a movie about talking toys. What I specifically love about the trash scene before this happens is how they foreshadow the aliens saving the rest of the toys with the claw, but in a that's gonna play a role in something but I don't know yet manner for the audience. So when they do, it doesn't feel so much like easy plot armor, it just feels like, oh, that's why the writers did that. It's hidden enough that the audience can still suspend some belief that they might die. Another thing I really like is that instead of the movie killing Lotso off after he betrays them like most Pixar villains, he gets to face sweet karma while the rest of the characters go on to not only survive but have an optimistic outlook on a new future with new kids. He could have chosen to let go of the past the same way Woody ends up doing, but he couldn't get over himself. So at the end of the day, he is his own revenge, his own villain. This ending where Andy lets go of his toys and passes them on to Bonnie, oh my god, masterpiece. The close-ups on Woody as you can read his mind on how he's feeling about these final moments with Andy, masterpiece. The silence in the air as both of them are saying goodbye to the past just through their eyes makes my stomach clench. They top this all off with Bonnie waving bye to Andy with Woody's hand and all the toys watching him leave. And then they top that off with an end credits montage of the Sunnyside toys making the place into what it should have been all along. Pixar was just at the top of their game here. Everything has the smartest outcome, and this film only gets more timeless and emotional as we grow up and get older. And that is how cinema should be. Toy Story 3 is in triple S tier. This could have been such a case study on how to end a trilogy off with 0 complaints, but alas, they could not let the IP up. How are you gonna follow all of this up with Woody getting stepped on in the next film? The audacity. I don't think the 4th movie is by any means as terrible as a lot of people like to act, but I do think it's unnecessary and made this franchise that changed and influenced the future of animation feel like just another cash grab, just another Ice Age. The unknown future Toy Story 3 ends with is perfect. It felt like a wrap up to a fantastic book series. There's something so special about that open-endedness that Pixar and so many studios don't get because they're so consumed with not just money, but the excuse, well, we have a good idea for the next one, so we're allowed to make another sequel. And they've repeated telling us that, completely missing the point that no matter how good it is, the audience is already full. We already got what we wanted. And that, my friends, concludes the Threequels ramble, whatever you want to call this. This might actually just be a podcast. Here is my finished tier list based on how well I think these movies accomplish being a threequel. Just kidding, I can hear you Sonic fans typing, asking me what about Sonic 3? What are your thoughts on Sonic 3? And now I wasn't going to feature it in this video as it's technically live action and that would open the doors to 1,000 more movies I don't want to watch, but it would feel on purpose to not include it. The Sonic movies are so impressive as they all manage to one-up each other like stairs. It's the rare occasion that a huge studio seems to genuinely listen and want to impress an audience and improve on itself. Sonic 3 does everything right from the last two and takes out everything wrong. Jim Carrey is even more Jim Carrey and you get 2 of him, which is accomplished so well. The human characters in the other movies are morphed in a little better. This might be the first Sonic movie where I thought there could actually be more human moments. Shadow comes in so epically and every shot featuring him is baked to the highest heat. The water falling onto his fur is great. The choice of having Shadow do an Akira slide is cinema. I was so impressed with the Shadow and Maria montage. It's maybe one of the most emotional, well put together scenes I've seen in a while, especially watching it knowing the fate of her. My only real complaint about this movie is that it could be a little shorter. I feel like it almost tries to accomplish too much, which can backfire sometimes because the movie experience is a constant, oh, is it gonna end here? Is it gonna end here? Is it gonna end here? But other than that complaint, Sonic 3 is an S tier. Revenge guac!